On the bank of Spider Creek, Polly Kemp bent down and grasped the wide cattail leaf. Leland Wickstaff and his twin sister Lenora stood on either side of her with big grins on their faces. Polly pulled the leaf back slowly. There sat a bullfrog nearly the size of a soup plate. Its shiny green and black skin glistened in the setting sun, and its wide eyes stared straight ahead. And then its loose skin beneath the frog's throat began to puff up like a ball as air was gulped into it, and the huge mouth opened wide. Jug-a-rum. I know you'd find that critter if you looked hard enough, crowed Leland. You done good, Polly. Frog raised its head, startled by the shout, and suddenly its powerful hind legs shot out and launched into a long dive over the water. It landed with a loud plop and disappeared. Consarn you, Leland Wickstaff, Polly howled. I didn't spend all that time looking for that frog just so you could scare it off. I wanted to watch it a while and maybe see it catch a fly with its long tongue, and then you started to beller in and make it jump off, and there ain't enough sun left to find another one. Why, haven't you got the sense you were born with? If brains were— Splat! A big gob of mud hit Polly right in the middle of her back. She spun about just in time to see Lenora scoop up another handful and hurl it at her. Polly dodged, and the mud splattered against a tree. You stop that, Lenora, she cried. I was talking to Leland, not you. It ain't fair. Each of you siding with each other whenever— Splat! This time it was Leland who threw the mud. It struck Holly on the ankle, and she could feel it run down her shoe. Let's play by ourselves, Lenora, said Leland. Just us two. Good idea, Lenora replied. We can make it like Polly just vanished. Don't you two dare pull a trick like that. Polly looked from one of the Wickstaff twins to the other. It was hard to tell them apart, especially now in twilight. Both wore blue overalls and checkered shirts. Both had freckles and hair the color of ripe wheat. The only difference was Lenora's hair was in braids, while Leland's looked like somebody put a bowl on his head and clipped away all the hair sticking out from under it. Lenora and Leland lived with their ma and pa in an old shanty down where the creek formed a big pond. Neither twin was great shakes in school, but what they did know about the mountains and woods and stream around Coventry wasn't worth knowing. They were as shy as wild foxes most of the time, but if an argument or fight started, you couldn't take on just one of the twins without having to answer to both of them, and Lenora was just as handy with either words or fists as her brother. Usually, though, they kept apart from other people, content with one another's company. Polly was proud and happy she'd been able to make friends with them several months ago. It had all started the day Polly found the crow with the broken wing. She was carrying it home when she met the twins on the path. What you got there, Polly? Leland asked. A crow's been hurt. I'm going to figure out some way to fix its wing bone, and then I'll split its tongue and— Split its tongue? Leland exclaimed. What for? I've heard that when you split a crow's tongue, it'll talk real words. I'm going to try it. No bird'll talk when you split its tongue, scoffed Lenora. Most likely you'll kill it. Leland, show Polly how to set that wing bone. The twins helped Polly set the wing and bandaged it tight to the crow's body before leaving for home. The following day, much to Polly's surprise, Leland and Lenora showed up bright and early, asking about the bird. In the weeks that followed, they took Polly along on their treks through the woods, one day searching out fiddler ferns and another locating a bee tree. Lenora even showed Polly how to catch a trout with just a few pieces of yarn tied to a hook, and by the time the crow was ready to be turned to the wild, Polly and the twins were close friends. Sometimes, however, Polly's mouth got in the way of their friendship. But unlike the village children, the twins didn't just walk off when Polly's mouth got the best of her. Leland and Lenora believed in getting even. Once Polly was yammering at Leland for pretending they'd gotten lost in the deep part of the forest, and right in the middle of her angry shouting, Lenora sneaked up and dropped a little green snake down the collar of her shirt. Another time, when a wasp stung Lenora and Polly jeered at her cries of pain, the twins picked her up and tossed her in the creek, clothes and all. This time they'd thrown mud, and now they stood at the edge of the woods, and Leland grinned at his sister. Ain't it nice just being out here, Lenora? He said, just the two of us. It sure is, Lenora replied. No Polly Kemp around with her infernal jabbering. You're talking like I was a mile away, said Polly angrily. I'm standing right here talking to you. Did you hear something, Lenora? Leland asked. Yeah, said his sister. It must have been old Froggy down in the swamp. I ain't no, howled Polly. But then the tone of her voice changed. I don't want you to seem mad at me, she went on softly. That frog's sounding more human all the time, said Leland. I'm sorry I talked that way. Please come back. Lenora turned about. I'll be. That ain't no frog, Leland. It's Polly Kemp. And what are you doing out here, Polly? Polly knew the twins were teasing her, but she didn't say a word. She didn't want them walking away again. I didn't see either of you at the church social, she said finally. I looked everywhere for you. We didn't go, Leland told her. Everyone expects you to spend money there, and I felt funny when I didn't have any to spend. And I don't like all the girls in their fancy dresses laughing at me because all I've got to wear is overalls, said Lenora. Well, listen. We'll listen if you want to talk to us about it, said Leland, trying to act bored. But Polly could tell the twins were eager to hear what went on. It was fair to middling, she began. The booths were real pretty, and there was lots of things for sale. But most folks acted like they usually do, either real uppity or else staring through me like I was invisible or something. And Mrs. Peabody carried on something fierce just because I said her cookies tasted like biting into a sofa pillow. The twins giggled. Then Lenora stuck her nose in the air and stuck out a limp-wrist hand. I suppose, she said, trying to act real fancy, that Agatha Benthorn and Eunice Ingersoll were there. Stop that, Lenora, Polly snapped. Just because I'm trying to make friends with Agatha and Eunice, you got no call to make fun of them. Them two ain't nothing but frilly little skunkweeds, said Leland. If we show them something we found in the woods or just walk up and talk to them, they get all high and mighty and treat us like we're nothing but bushels of dirt. Do you think they want to see the frog you just found? Added Lenora. I guess not. One look they'd go scooting off with their noses in the air and holding their lacy skirts high so not to get any dirt on them. You just ain't their kind, Polly, and you should be thankful for that. They never so much as give you the time of day, said Leland, so why do you keep chasing after those stuck-up little prigs is beyond me. They're quiet folks, said Polly, and rich, too. I plan to be like them someday. I'll live in the biggest house in Coventry, and I'll buy everything I ever wanted, and I think you've gone fuzzy in the head, Leland declared. I ain't. You'll see. Agatha and Eunice are too dumb to enjoy the woods and the crick, all the things we like, snorted Lenora with a toss of her head. All they like to do is sit on silk pillows and talk about the latest fashions and drink weak tea and, yuck, come on, Leland, let's go home. Off they went, leaving Polly standing in the red twilight. It was dark by the time that Polly got home. She entered the living room, and her mother looked up from a lapful of clothes she was sewing and mending for the Coventry ladies who had neither the time nor the skill. You're late, Mrs. Kemp said. And how are Leland and Lenora? Consarn those two. I don't care what they think. I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm going to make friends with Agatha and Eunice if it kills me, and then folks will sit up and take notice of me all right. The next day, Sunday, everyone in Coventry was all togged out in fine fashion going to church. The women had on bright dresses, and the men wore suits and ties, and sometimes tugging at the collars that were too tight. Agatha Benthorn looked pretty enough to gladden the heart of an angel. Her hair was curled, and she wore a new dress covered in lace. Around her waist was a wide pink ribbon tied in the back with a bow. The service went just fine, with the Reverend Terwingler preaching a sermon that must have had the devil shaking in his boots, and it wasn't until afterward the trouble started. When Agatha came outside, Polly was right behind her. Agatha rushed down the stairs to greet Eunice Ingersoll. At the same time, Polly reached out and took hold of one of the loops of the pink ribbon bow, and there was a loud ripping sound. Agatha stood at the bottom of the steps with the bow of her dress all ragged and torn. Polly was at the top with a big piece of ribbon in her fist. One look at Polly, and you could see how sorry she was for what she'd done. She opened her mouth, but no words came out, and then Agatha ran up the steps to Polly and slapped her right across the face, hard. Agatha, If Polly didn't have any words, Agatha sure did. You wretched thing, she spat. You tore my beautiful dress. You ragamuffin of all the spiteful. Agatha, if you just... No! Agatha leveled a finger at Polly, the way she might have pointed a pistol. You are dirt, Polly Kemp. You are dirt and everything that's horrid. There's not a person in the town who wants anything to do with you, so you stay away from me. Do you hear? Stay away. Off went Agatha, leaving Polly red-eyed and almost crying. She just wanted to be friends with Agatha. Now the whole thing seemed spoiled beyond repair. Polly moped about the house all day, and her mother wondered if she was coming down with some illness. Evening came, and Polly trudged up to her room to do her homework. And outside, down by Spider Creek, the frogs began their shrill chirping and peeping. To Polly, it sounded like Agatha, Agatha, and then the deep bullfrog's croak, like the string of a bass fiddle being plucked, jug-a-rum. And then suddenly, Polly got up from her chair. She walked to the little table near the window. There she'd left it after the church social was the card with the red circle on it. In the twilight, Polly turned the card over and over in her hands. Oh, it was foolish, of course. Yet she'd spent her 50 cents. Thaddeus Blinn had told her that whatever she asked for would be hers. What was the harm in trying? Carefully she placed her right thumb over the red circle. I want ever so badly to be liked, she said softly, and not just by Leland and Lenora either. I want people to greet me, and not walk on the other side of the street whenever they set eyes on me. And especially I want Agatha Benthorn to invite me to her house for tea. So that's what I'm wishing for, Mr. Wishgiver. I'm wishing that people will pay attention to me and smile when they see me, and I wish that someday soon Agatha will ask me to come to her house. I know I'm a fool for believing Thaddeus Blinn is anything but a fake, but... Suddenly Polly dropped the card. That was funny. The red spot felt warm, almost hot against her thumb, and she looked down at the floor, and a little gasp escaped from her throat. The card had fallen under the bed, away from the light of the tiny lamp. In the darkness, the spot on the card glowed like burning coal, and outside her window the sounds of the frog could still be heard.